Standing before 30 corporate executives in a sleek top-floor glass conference room, I watched my boss smile as he fired me right before signing an $800 million merger deal. The entire room went completely dead silent, expecting me to break down or beg for my position, but I simply nodded and walked out with a faint smile. What my chief executive officer did not realize was that he had just terminated the sole owner of the physical servers, running 90% of our entire company infrastructure. My name is Jenna, and for 7 years, I worked as the head of infrastructure management, building our tech systems from the ground up without ever caring about corporate politics. I grew up in a working-class household in Ohio, where my parents taught me that real value comes from quiet dedication rather than flashy self-promotion. While other executives spent their afternoons playing golf and networking, I spent long nights in server rooms mapping every circuit, redundancy protocol, and potential single point of failure across our global grid. 3 years before this nightmare unfolded, our firm landed a massive municipal contract that required extreme data security and near-perfect operational uptime to succeed. Our former leader lacked $7 million needed to construct the necessary server framework on time, leaving the business facing complete bankruptcy if we failed. I stepped in with a private solution, personally financing the server array through my own legal entity and leasing the hardware back to the company at strict operating costs. The legal lease contract was crafted by top corporate attorneys, giving our company exclusive hardware usage while keeping full title ownership under my personal company name. It explicitly stated that if I was ever wrongfully terminated without cause, the lease agreement would immediately end, revoking all system access within 72 hours. I wiped out my savings, took out heavy private loans, and worked 80-hour weeks to install the hardware properly, ensuring the system ran perfectly for years. When our original chief executive retired, the board hired a charismatic new corporate leader named Preston Vance, who cared deeply about media appearances and personal prestige. Preston brought along his ruthless second-in-command, a man named Donald, and the pair immediately began replacing dedicated internal leaders with their personal inner circle. Because my technical team stayed quietly in the background, delivering perfect operational results without making noise, Preston completely ignored our department and assumed our silent systems ran on their own. When the opportunity arose to close a massive partnership with a global logistics empire, Preston treated it as his personal trophy. My technical team pulled grueling shifts for 6 straight months to construct custom data pipelines that could effortlessly handle massive international operational traffic demands for our prospective partners. When their executive team, led by a stern woman named Victoria, agreed to sign the final partnership documents at our corporate headquarters, Preston took all the public credit. On the morning of the deal signing, I arrived at 6 a.m. to run complete operational diagnostics and verify that every hardware cluster was performing perfectly. The atmosphere inside the conference room was electric, packed with high-powered corporate lawyers, board members, and visiting executives enjoying champagne. I stood calmly toward the back of the room in my formal suit, satisfied that my years of hard labor had made this historic business deal possible for everyone involved. Just as Victoria leaned over the mahogany table with her fountain pen, ready to execute the final signature pages, Preston unexpectedly stood up and demanded full silence. He looked directly at me with a cold glare and announced to the crowded room that I was being terminated immediately for gross operational incompetence. Preston publicly declared that my services were no longer needed, ordering 2 security guards to step forward and escort me out. A sharp gasp echoed through the conference room, and I saw Victoria narrow her eyes in absolute shock as security moved in to guide me toward the exit doors. Instead of screaming or causing a scene, I looked Preston dead in the eyes, smiled, and quietly suggested that he carefully review the original server lease documentation before the end of the week. Preston dismissively laughed off my warning, telling the crowd that my bitter parting comments meant nothing, before urging Victoria to continue signing the contract. The moment I reached my vehicle in the parking garage, I called my personal attorney, Clara Jenkins, to report what happened. Clara gasped in disbelief at Preston's foolishness, confirming that his public firing without cause had officially activated the 72-hour legal clock to terminate hardware access. I instructed Clara to file the formal revocation papers immediately, knowing that Preston and Donald were about to experience a catastrophic reality check they would never recover from. By 6 that evening, my phone began ringing incessantly with frantic text messages from colleagues and desperate voice notes from upper management asking about system permissions. Donald had spent the afternoon trying to locate ownership records for our primary server arrays. only to discover every core asset was registered directly to me. I ignored every direct attempt at communication, allowing Clara to handle all incoming correspondence while I rested comfortably at home, knowing my legal position was completely airtight. By the afternoon of day 2, our former chief executive called my personal line to express his profound embarrassment and offer a heartfelt personal apology for Preston behavior. He informed me that Victoria had officially walked away from the merger after witnessing Preston unprofessional, cruelty, and discovering the severe risk to company infrastructure. Preston was currently facing a ferocious emergency board meeting where directors were demanding answers about why our core enterprise hardware was shutting down across multiple offices. At midnight on the 3rd day, the 72-hour legal grace period expired, and my server networks automatically cut off all external access requests from company headquarters. Without my primary hardware infrastructure, 70% of the firm operations came to a complete standstill, leaving corporate executives completely helpless and unable to service their remaining clients. The board of directors immediately bypassed Preston entirely, begging Clara to set up an emergency legal mediation session at a neutral law firm downtown. The following morning, I walked into the neutral conference room flanked by Clara, finding 3 senior board members sitting alongside a visibly shaken, pale Preston. Board chairwoman Eleanor took the lead, admitting that my public termination was an unbelievable mistake and offering to reinstate my old position with full back pay. I calmly declined their initial offer, sliding a freshly drafted legal proposal across the dark wooden table that outlined 2 very strict options for the board to choose from. Option 1 required the firm to purchase my hardware infrastructure outright at full market appraisal value, allowing me to transition the framework over 3 months and walk away permanently. Option 2 required them to appoint me as Chief Technology Officer with direct board authority, grant me substantial equity, and renew the lease at modern rates. When Preston foolishly attempted to interrupt and accuse me of illegal extortion, Eleanor slammed her hands on the table and ordered him to remain completely silent for the remainder of the meeting. The board members spent the evening analyzing the massive financial ruin of attempting to rebuild a comparable server system from scratch, which would take 18 months and $15 million. By 8 that evening, Eleanor called me personally to confirm that the board had voted unanimously to accept my terms for Option 2 and appoint me Chief Technology Officer. She also informed me that Preston and Donald had both been summarily terminated by the board for extreme negligence and severe fiduciary failure. Over the next 6 months, I completely restructured our corporate technology department, bringing in exceptional technical talent and rebuilding our entire enterprise system from the ground up. I personally reconnected with Victoria, demonstrating our restored operational stability and successfully securing a revised $750 million partnership deal for our firm. My private server company continued to thrive independently, generating consistent leasing revenue while ensuring that no corporate executive could ever take my hard work for granted again. Looking back at that dramatic afternoon, I realized that true professional strength does not come from corporate titles or public arrogance. It comes from knowing your intrinsic worth, legally protecting your vital contributions, and allowing your silent work to speak for itself when untrustworthy people try to diminish you. Today, every system in our corporate headquarters runs seamlessly under my direct authority, proving that quiet competence will always outlast loud corporate egos in the end. When you build the foundation that holds up an entire enterprise, you never have to shout to prove your value, because the results will always do the talking for you.